So it's on him. I don't get busy on the design side.
Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Wayne Arthur, the owner and operator of SpeedPro Metrowest. He helps Massachusetts organizations and businesses accelerate growth and bring brands to life through graphic printing and solutions that create engaging experiences for corporate, retail, events, and more. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I know I gave a brief overview of you and what you do, but do you want to go a little bit further into that with our audience and tell them more about SpeedPro and everything you're up to?
Sure. SpeedPro is a graphics and small signage organization. So I like to say we do everything from lawn signs up to museum graphics because it's true, right? So we're kind of behind everything you see out there on the road. We just did a fleet of trucks. We just did a corporate office with wall murals and graphics, and even down towards working with big colleges and schools around the area. To kind of bring their branding to life. And that's really what we do. So that's the nutshell. A lot of folks will call us with design needs all the way up to, again, like we said, manifesting itself through things like you see behind me here, which is, for those of you not on video, is a graphic up on a wall in Cambridge.
Awesome. And let's talk a little bit more about what led you to being the owner of SpeedPro MetroWest. What was that like in your journey that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, I'll give you the brief story because it's a long story, but I always had this passion of doing something on my own and having my own business, but was always skeptical of could I actually do it. I was unfortunately part of a corporate restructuring in 2019, which then led me to finding my next corporate job and having two companies I was working with call me up and say, we're going to give you an offer on Tuesday. And it's the greatest thing ever. I'm going to get two job offers. But they both called me on Tuesday and put all hiring on hold because of this thing called COVID. So, and then I was getting a ton of conversations, but most folks are saying it might be a year to 2 years before they hired. So that's kind of the aha moment where, you start to reflect and, get anxiety about what am I going to do? What am I going to do for making a living? I've got two kids, 2 years. And it became down to having that conversation with my family about, I want to do this, right? And let's see what's out there. I had the time. Not all these folks have the luxury of that, but I had the time to look around and figure out what's next for me. And happened into a business broker, happened into SpeedPro where I am now, just again, through networking and a gentleman that was looking to sell his business. And the rest is kind of history, so to say.
Yeah. And so I think that's really exciting that you got led into this business by being able to purchase it from the previous owner. But did you think that you would go into the industry that you are now, or was it just an opportunity that came across that just felt like the right fit?
A little bit of both. So I've worked in some companies that did printing from Vistaprint to Staples, but I was in a completely different aspect of those companies, more on the software product management side. So when you're actually making things, I was never really involved with that. And the broker I was working with actually asked in the first call, would you be interested in a printing business? And she didn't know much about me. I said, why would you say that? And so interestingly enough, I put that off to the side to say, yeah, I don't want to go into the printing business. But going through, that litmus test and check of what you like about the business, what you don't like about the business, it kind of kept coming back to the one that I ended up purchasing, which is the SpeedPro.
Yeah. And when you purchased that, what are some things that you would say have come out of it since then? Like any exciting projects you've been working on, or even some things that might be unexpected that you've run into since?
Yeah, it's funny because there are so many. One few exciting things that we've done is, for example, we wrapped the Grand Marshal Mobile for the Boston Marathon, first for Big Poppy, and then last year for Rob Gronkowski. Again, it comes down to networking and building your business. And somebody said, I know a guy, and that was me, right? So those are cool things. And then Animal Rescue League here in Boston, they have a new headquarters. And they were looking for somebody to help them bring their brand to life with inside their organization. So we actually ended up helping them as well. So really a pretty broad spectrum of really cool projects that we get to work on. But we talk about some of the bigger names. We just did a salon down in South Boston, all interior graphics. Really, the woman was almost in tears when she saw it. She's like, "This is exactly what I wanted," right? So
Oh, I love that.
that's really the more important pieces. I would say the more exciting is those that are closer to the ownership and have a vested interest in the project. That's where you get the light, so to speak, when folks look at the end result.
Absolutely. And what are the benefits, or I should say also the ROI of someone hiring like a company like SpeedPro Metrowest to do the graphic printing and solutions rather than perhaps trying to do it in-house or any other solution there?
Yeah, it's interesting. Given pricing these days and
Mm,
inflation, we do, especially on the small business side, we get a lot of folks that come to us and said, "I designed this in my own personal graphic design software, some of the free products online." And a lot of times it doesn't really translate to be able to manifest itself in things like you see behind me or the art that we've talked about. So we see those pressures coming from the folks there, but at the end of the day, our goal is to translate their vision into something that can be reality. And the time that they invest in trying to save money quite often detracts from them being able to run their own business. And
mm.
we actually get the comment quite often, "I wish I'd come to you earlier."
Oh, yeah.
So that's one piece is getting it done. But then two is, we work on a storefront right now. We're working on one for a company that's opening something in Dedham. And what they're challenged with is kind of the identity within the community, right? And people are walking by. So once you put this on their storefront and once you gain the attraction of folks and the eyeballs, so to speak, that's where the true ROI is for them. And I think I tend to talk a little bit about making sure you are where you want your customers to be. It's easy to see the ROI on a vehicle wrap as an example for a commercial business. We did one truck for a moving company, and they quickly called us and said, "We need the rest of them wrapped."
Oh,
And we're getting
wow.
so
Good
many
problem
phone
to
calls,
have.
right? Yeah. But then it translates into the experience you want them to have with your organization.
Mhm.
So we actually then did some branding, or going to do some branding within their warehouse for the employees, because the employees are driving in these trucks and they're so excited. So we're then going to put up a wall mural about that with their corporate values. And so it starts to translate not just from your end customers, but I view employees as customers as well, because you need to keep them happy as well.
Absolutely. And you brought up a great point about the store that you're working with in Dedham, how just that initial graphics and artwork that'd be shown in the front of their storefront is what will really draw people in the first place. So it's like that
Right.
first thing that will catch someone's eye and make them stop and make them actually want to walk into that store. And I think that's a really important point that you bring up, is just being able to capture someone's attention right off the bat.
Right. Right. Exactly. And just to go a little bit further with that, we're working with another company that's going to build out a location on Newbury Street. And, as important of the graphics that are the final graphics are the interim graphics or the coming soon graphics. And it just comes down to not awareness, but then translating that into the consideration of what is the product that you have to get them in the front door.
Absolutely. And with the customers that you work with, do you take an idea, like a very specific idea that they have, and bring it to life? Or do you also help with like the ideation process, where if someone's like, "I know I want something here, I don't know what it is, I need someone's help to help kind of draft up what this might be." Like, what's that like? Do you have both ends of the process that you cover?
We do, I think, but much more limited on the what I call the whiteboard approach.
Mm,
If we come back to typically when you have the whiteboard approach, it's a small business. And getting into the design realm for us can be pretty expensive. Our resources are better utilized in, um, I guess I would say, leveraging and laying out something that's a vision that's already been started, whether it's brand assets or corporate values or even retail window front. Having that vision and understanding allows us to do things a lot quicker. Starting from scratch can consume our resources, and we partner with other local graphic designers, or even as recently as a large uh, design firm is helping out that retail location I mentioned in Dedham to build out their whole front vision, right? And that's where it's for us, it's better to leverage the specialists in that area. But again, back to the small businesses, we were designing a sign this morning for a small business. They don't have the resources. We're happy to do it, but understanding that it's going to be a finite budget that they can work with.
Right. And that's actually a great point that you bring up as well, is that you partner with those local design firms or local graphic designers to help with that process if they do need the actual design piece included with it. And I can imagine that's a valuable business partnership for you to have, where both of you can refer clients back and forth to one another depending on what the needs are.
Exactly.
Awesome. And so when you were transitioning into this business ownership piece, like what were some challenges that came up or roadblocks that you ultimately had to get past?
That's a great question. I think there's a few of them. I think it comes down to what's your risk tolerance, right? One, and then two is financial tolerance, right? So this isn't something obviously that people go into and say, I'll give it a try for a year and get out, right? So the biggest thing was really trying to set expectations for what does this mean for me, my family, and then what we want to accomplish kind of as a team, so to speak. And then really staying true to that, right? Not just on the investment side, but the work-life balance, understanding how the business can pull you, and you might have to make changes to your personal life to be able to accommodate the business life and vice versa, right? So those are a couple of the big things going into it that we were thinking about. But then it comes down to some other things that are, as you get into it, it's for me personally, it was getting over the I can do it all myself mentality.
Yeah.
And it truly is, you're doing everything from fixing the plumbing all the way up to meetings with executives at large companies for the business. And so how do you find and make sure you go in when you're going into this, that you've got the support network you need, from, like I said, from administrative to on up to sales, so to speak.
Definitely. And knowing that SpeedPro is a franchise, how would you say that that has helped you and supported you along the way?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to having that trusted partner. Every franchise is different in terms of the model that they have. The McDonald's model is, here's the playbook, execute the playbook, right? Some franchises are very rigorous on that. Others are a lot more lax. I was actually personally looking for something that had a little bit more latitude into it so I could create kind of the organization that I desired. So I really enjoy this franchise because they do help out tremendously with some of those administrative side of things, both with systems, processes, as well as, and more importantly, I guess I would say the marketing side, from the social media as well as Google and paid search and organic search. So while I do have a background in that and keep a good pulse on it, it frees up a lot of my time to really help grow the business.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's thinking about buying into a business that's part of a franchise, do you have any specific advice or tips that you would share with them?
Yeah, I think a lot of this comes down to, in small business ownership, is making sure you're self-aware, understanding what you're good at, what you're not good at, what do you want to do versus what do you not want to do. And then being crystal clear when you go in and evaluate a franchise, what is that level of support that you're going to get? Understanding where you can get a support that they might not offer through peers or et cetera. But then also doing your diligence on what level of sophistication is this franchise. Again, back to the McDonald's side of things, to another that might be just more or less a brand and a logo that you put up, and they might help you out with a few system things. So what specifically are they going to do for you, and then kind of plot where that fits within your self-awareness results and findings, right? There are folks that really want to dive in and say, hey, I want to be part of this business. So in the franchise world, they talk about absentee owners, where they can buy the business, set up the staff, and then have a general manager run the business, versus my business, where I'm actively involved very deeply every single day, right? And that's the type of business I wanted. So there's quite a bit that goes into that. But I would also give some advice because there are plenty of franchise brokers out there and folks that have been in it. There's two things. One is making sure you fully evaluate that broker that you're working with and identify what you're looking for. And then more importantly, making sure you're talking to franchisees in those businesses to really, one, flesh out, is that how they operate? And then also making sure that you're understanding where that puts you in terms of your longer term goals, 3 years, 5 years. Again, back to, do I want to start and run the business and then step out in 5 years and hire a GM? And that's all pretty important.
Yeah, and those are great suggestions that you brought up, is being able to come in and think about what you're looking to do with the business or with the franchise once you end up taking it over, and thinking about if there's different ways that you want to grow it beyond what the previous owner was doing, or even different services or offerings that you might want to incorporate based on what was done before.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Were there any big changes that you made that from what was done previously with SpeedPro MetroWest that you think have really kind of helped to support your customers, or kind of helped to really make a difference in the results?
Yeah. So kind of stepping into any business, it's really understanding, what do you think you can accomplish with this business? Now, I will never recommend buying a business during a pandemic. But, I think I started out saying, hey, and distinctly, I remember having the conversation with the franchise and a specific gentleman. And I said, do you think I can double this business in 2 years? And his comment to me was, I know I could, but I don't know you well enough. And I was like, oh, so a little bit of a gauntlet thrown down that challenge. So the short answer is I did. And I think with that growth says, okay, now what do I need to be able to do to be able to continue that growth? So when I bought the business, there was one employee, obviously, and actually, if I step back a little bit, as I look at things, I look at it in terms of people, process, and technology, and understanding, what's working, what's not working, and where do I need to invest to continue the growth. So I started with one person who probably could have been a part-time person when I bought the business. There's 4 of us now. And since then, we've invested in quite a bit of equipment that has expanded our capabilities. I have some strong outsource partners too for things that I cannot make. And as I look at the things that I do outsource, the questions are now, what can I bring in-house to then help me grow my business, right? And so along the people, processing, technology, I think we've done well, or I've done well on the hiring the people. I've done well on the technology. And I would say that my processes are not very strong. So again, back to being aware of what you need to work on and setting those priorities. I think it's something that you just need to be cognizant of and continue to say, how do I get better at the areas where we're not so strong? And so we're working on it. And we bang into it every day.
Yeah. I love that you brought up being able to bring in the people specifically, and just growing it from that one employee to what you have now, whether it's people that are directly in-house, or like you mentioned, those external consultants or vendors that you work with. What were some things that you found helped with finding the right fit for people that you brought into the organization, or things that you learned along the way for anyone who's looking to grow the people that they have on their team or expand their business in that capacity?
Yeah. As we all know, people can be the hardest thing to do, to find, especially since you have such a limited amount of time to interview somebody and get them in the door and get them working, right? So I think there's a couple things that I look at for folks is, well, first, do they have the skill set in the industry that I'm looking at? But and then understanding where they might be weak, and more importantly, are they willing to learn? Right. And again, it's a little hard to diagnose that or understand that in an interview, but you can at least gauge some of that out of these folks. But I think the other thing is passion and drive. I think every day we're learning something new, and we've gone through a decent number of folks here because, again, back to the interview side of things, you never know how somebody's willing to flex and adapt in a small business. I might need hands cleaning, and you might be a graphic designer. Well, we're all one family, and we have to figure out how to get it all done, right? And having those people that are flexible and willing to adapt and willing to grow with the company is exciting. I think the other piece too around the people is how do you keep them motivated and interested in what we're doing? And I think we actually have a pretty good luxury in our business of having continuously new projects every day. Like when something comes in, we even wrapped a hot dog machine for the owner of the Bruins, right? When you have something like that, everybody's like, "You're going to wrap a hot dog machine?" And then we found out who it's from. It's like, cool,
Right.
That just gives you the little pizzazz. So finding those things to champion and celebrate, but also, again, is hard to do. We have the luxury of having cool and exciting projects come at us, and then even driving down the road, we'll text each other pictures of vehicles we've wrapped when we're driving down the road. We say, "Hey, there's another one," right?
Yeah.
Not many people get to do that.
Oh, that's fun. And I
Yeah.
think it's great that you've been able to expand your team in that capacity. And one thing that you mentioned is you're still heavily involved in the day-to-day and the projects that you work on for your customers. But with that, how do you balance working in your business versus working on your business? And I imagine that having a team can kind of help you with that. But have you kind of like set up a process or anything like that to ensure that you're focusing on business development and rather than just focusing entirely on projects?
Yeah, I think that back to where I said one of the biggest things we need to work on is the process. And I do have an expectation. I'm coming up on year 5 of being able to, I guess, sort of take my foot off the pedal a little bit and refocus in areas of business development. We're not there yet. The last employee was hired about 4 or 5 months ago. So we're still working through, I think the hard part is when it was myself and one person, it was pretty easy. The communication was great. Adding the third person, we had to figure out what that third leg looked like. Now adding the fourth person, it's a challenge, right? And we're trying to figure out those processes to, one, not drop a customer, and 2, making sure we're being as responsive as possible to their expectations, both in terms of quality and on-time delivery. And so it really comes down to the processes and making sure that we can get these working seamlessly and quickly, right? Even if I come back to the question you asked about starting from design from scratch, if I take one of those legs of the stool out to focus a day or 2 on design only, it becomes crippling. And that's why we've partnered up with some folks locally to help us with the design. But until my hope is once we get to the processes that work and allowing us to get the throughput that we desired, again, still delivering on what I believe our brand promise is, on time, on quality, but really when something goes out the door, we're going to delight somebody. That will be hard for us to make sure that we can accomplish. And that's pretty much what we're focused in on the next 6 to 8 months. And this is one area where a franchise, especially SpeedPro, comes in handy. We have such a strong ownership network that, I can pick up the phone and call the guy in Pennsylvania or New Jersey or anywhere. How do you do this? Or here's what I'm struggling with. And there's no shortage of feedback, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And I can imagine that sense of community is huge, of people who have been in the franchise for several years and have all of that experience that they can share with you, and connections and resources and all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when a company is looking to work with a company like yours of SpeedPro, and they're looking for something like the graphic printing and solutions that you provide, like what are the first steps that they should take? Like they know that they want something. How can they actually get started with working with you?
Yeah, it's interesting in today's world where so much is done just over email or non-face-to-face communications. It's really hard to translate your vision in an email, right? So we'll often get an email. I have one from today. We want to put some graphics up on our storefront. How much will it cost? I want to build a house. How much does it cost? It's the same question, right?
Right.
What's the square footage? Do you have a design? Some of those things. So I think it's really important to be crystal clear on your vision, right? And then where's it going to manifest itself? It's going to be on the front windows. They're 4 foot by 8 foot. There's 3 of them. And you know, if you have artwork, or even we're working with a gentleman now who is an author of children's books. And so we get a lot of sketches.
Yeah.
That helps out a lot, right? That gets us at least understanding. But I think what I'd like to drive people back towards is, how do we have a Zoom conversation or an in-person meeting? Because the last thing we want to do is put something up that you aren't in love with.
Right.
But 2 is it more importantly is it takes us both a long time to get there. And if you're a small business owner, as I am, or my team, we just want to make sure we can get it through it as efficiently and effectively. And it seems like a lot of folks are just firing off emails to say, how much will this cost? Well, are you serious or you're not serious? And let's have that conversation.
Right.
So to me, that's pretty much the most important thing. And it's actually a good litmus test that we have for folks that are just trying to kick the tires a little bit, for those that are like, I really want to make an impression with my customers, and I'm serious about moving this forward. And that's really where we excel is, you know, if you want to move it forward, we'll help you. The most important thing is to have a budget in mind.
Yes.
We can spend a lot of money, and we can also spend a little money. So if you know where you want to go with it, we can give you options.
Yeah. And I think that's a great piece to keep in mind, is that being able to meet in person or meet through Zoom is something that can really make all the difference. And it sounds like customer service is something that you deeply prioritize and execute for the customers that you work with, and making sure that they truly feel satisfied, because what you create for them, of course, is a reflection of their brand and what they're putting out into the world.
Absolutely. And more importantly, we're hoping that they're going to refer us to their peers as well.
Right. Because I can imagine that when someone physically sees what you've produced for them, then that's a great referral source in that aspect. If they get questions of who did that for you, or how can I get in touch
Right.
with who created that for you? And I think that's probably really nice too, is just having that physical appearance of the work that you've been able to produce.
Exactly. And I do feel that that's been, you know, part of our growth model. And obviously everybody's growth model is the referral network.
Hmm.
You know, and it's been surprising where we did some graphics for a gym in Brookline, and a week later, we got a call from a gym down the road who said, we saw your graphics and they referred us to you. And I was like, oh, that's a competitor. Well, okay,
Yeah.
we're fine with that, you know, but that means our client was super happy with what we did.
Oh, absolutely. And with what you create for your customers, do you encourage them, or kind of like lead them towards creating something that might be Instagrammable per se? I mean, with me working in marketing, I'm always saying to my clients, what can we create for you that will encourage people to stop, take a picture, post it, and tag you? Do you often see that with what you produce for your clients?
It's interesting. I do feel the small businesses, yes. The larger
Mm.
businesses, it tends to be not, we don't get as much of that. But we do work with a variety of companies. When we work with event companies for venues, um, obviously that comes into play because they're looking to socialize not only for their clients, but themselves about, here's the event that we pulled off. And here's, unfortunately, we typically are the back end providers. So we don't
Mm.
often get touted as, hey, look what SpeedPro did it for us. But, you know, you can at least use that as a testament in your website or other areas like that. But definitely the small businesses, I'll tell you that moving company created a whole video and they set up a tripod with a GoPro and drove around their fleet of trucks. And
Oh,
then,
cool.
and they did it before, and kind of like an before and after. Like the before was the white truck, and then halfway through the video, it just morphed into this fully wrapped moving truck. And they received a lot of impressions on that, and we've actually received some business from that.
Oh, nice. So that's good to
Yeah,
kind of see your work out in the wild, I guess is the best way to put it.
yeah,
Good to see it kind of in use and whatnot. And I can imagine it's a gratifying feeling, like what you mentioned earlier, when you're driving around and see a fleet of trucks or see any storefront of the work that you've done.
absolutely.
Awesome. Wayne, as we get closer to the end of this episode, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is what their favorite local businesses are to support. So if you only had to pick a few, what would you say are your favorite places?
Um, it's interesting. I think there's a lot. Unfortunately, I like to eat. So We just had a client in here, Gigi's, and she does Haitian food, and it was
Ooh.
phenomenal. Yeah, she's got a location in Framingham and Watertown, and there's another one opening up. I can't disclose where yet, but yeah, just really great food.
Awesome. And if people want to get in touch with you to learn more about you and SpeedPro MetroWest, where can they do so?
Yeah, you can go to our website or Google us, SpeedPro Boston MetroWest. And that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with us and the easiest way for folks to remember.
Perfect. And I will link to those places in the show notes. That way our listeners can click through and connect with you from there. But thank you so much again for being a guest on today's show, Wayne.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.